For 39 years, I had no idea why I was so weird, or why I hated taking showers so much, or why I struggled so much with friendships, or why I got fired from every job I ever had. But when I got a medical diagnosis of autism in 2012, the mystery was solved. It was not moral failing. It wasn't just a terrible person or someone who had a bad personality. I was disordered. I was broken. I was a missing puzzle piece to be solved. And while this might sound like bad news, to me it felt great. Instead of this mystery of what is wrong with me, I knew I had a name, and now I could solve the problem of me. I set about to cure my autism with a focus that only an autistic person could have. I made spreadsheets, I studied all the treatments, I analyzed them with vigor, and then I created a process, a system to find the solution for me. It started with ACT, then CBT, DBT, EFT, EMDR. Okay, I'm not going to take you through the whole alphabet, but really there was a process. And what I learned is there is no pill for autism, but there is something that each of these treatments have in common. They each treat the autistic person by teaching them to act like a completely different person, to just pretend all day to be someone else. And if you can be, and this is the clinical term for it, indistinguishable from your neurotypical peers, you get the little gold star, you have graduated, and you can move right on. And lucky for me, I was amazing at this. I finally had the Rosetta Stone. I knew what I needed to do and how I needed to act. And as I did that, I looked to the outside like I was suddenly very successful. I had gone from struggling to 6 figures. I had hundreds of thousands of social media followers, and I always looked so happy because I had learned how to do the smile that my neurotypical overlords so enjoyed. But inside, I was disappearing. I didn't know who I was anymore. This endless cycle of masking and people-pleasing and checking, was I doing it all right? Checking that usually on social media just for validation. And I lost myself. I got sick, I lost my voice, I lost friends and family, until one day I thought I was going to disappear forever. And this isn't just my story, the story of autistic people who get a diagnosis and try to fix themselves. Actually getting sicker is quite common. A study, a meta-analysis in the journal Molecular Autism in 2023 looked at high-masking autistic people comparing suicidality to the general population. And what they found is high-masking autistic people are 7 to 16 times more likely to die by suicide. And the British Journal of Psychiatry had a study in there that showed the average life expectancy of autistic people that are high-masking is just 58 years old. And these aren't just numbers. These are actual people whose lives are cut short by a lack of understanding and support that is so readily available. That is what is so hard about this medical model, is that it reduces autistic people to being broken neurotypicals instead of being able to see themselves as whole and as unique. And before we get too much further, I want to be clear here. I am by no means making the argument that autistic people don't have medical needs. Of course we have medical needs. In fact, we have more medical needs than the general population because of many conditions that are highly co-occurring. So Autistic people, about 20 to 30% of us have intellectual disabilities, can be non-speaking. We have a lot of gastrointestinal issues. We have a higher rate of autoimmune conditions. And then also, as you can imagine, the cycle of masking and burnout leads to a lot of psychological conditions. PTSD, there's like 80% of autistic people have chronic trauma issues. OCD, eating disorders, even TMJ. So there are many co-occurring medical conditions that need and deserve treatment, and treatment specifically designed for autistic people, which there are differences. What we don't need, my friends, is a treatment for autism. Because autism itself is not the medical condition. It's no different from eye color. When we look at autism through that medical lens, that is where we are missing an opportunity to save autistic lives. And that is what I want to share with you today. Because in case you missed it, autistic people are in a very vulnerable moment right now. There is a widespread belief that there is suddenly an epidemic of autistic people or overdiagnosis of neurodivergence. And I just want you to really understand, the studies have been done. This is probably the most studied piece of biology of the last 20 years. The question has been answered. What causes autism? Is autistic people having babies? So we can look at this here of what has happened is that the doctors changed the definition. And that is why there is a spike. And how did they change this definition? They made it more inclusive. We used to think autism was a childhood condition. And we thought maybe the cause was vaccines, or actually one of the theories was refrigerator mothers. If you had a mean mom, that was what was going to cause autism. There were a whole bunch of theories of what would cause this. And so we studied it. In fact, the Journal of the American Medical Association did a comprehensive study of 37,000 pairs of twins. So looking at identical twins and fraternal twins. And what they found is that autism is actually more heritable than height, slightly less heritable than eye color. And these are not isolated or random studies. These trials have been repeated over and over and over again. And even if they weren't, what I can tell you is there is nowhere this is more obvious in my own life than when I think about my grandmother. My Mimi was born in 1919, long before Lorna Wing had ever introduced autism into the DSM. And she grew up poor. She couldn't really read or write very well. She had a third grade education. But when it came to cut and pressed glass, my grandmother had an encyclopedic knowledge. She could tell you the patterns, the factories, the designers, the years they were made, how many of each. And when I would go over and visit, she would take all of her treasures out of her curio cabinets and she would line them up by type or pattern or country or designer. And she would share with me about each of them with so much joy. In autistic culture, we call this an info dump. And as we often say, info dumps are our love language. What we want is to be able to share our passions and our joys. And for many of us, that means making spreadsheets. But for my grandmother, she was able to gather this vast amount of knowledge without the ability to read or write. Just think about how challenging that would be to do. This is what it means to be autistic and to share your love of your special interests. And I guess that's why I started the Autistic Culture podcast, because every week we get together for an hour, somebody shares an info dump, and it is like being in my grandmother's living room all over again. Because there is something that autistic culture can do for autistic people that medical solutions and treatments never can, and that's to provide community, belonging, connection. And this is the coolest thing: the confidence, clarity, and information to seek and advocate for the medical treatment they need to live longer and healthier lives. And that is something the medical model just cannot do. I know autistic culture saves lives, and knowing what autistic culture is for the people you run into in your family or at work, that having this knowledge can help you make their lives better. So with your permission, I would like to use the rest of my time to do a little autistic culture training, if you're up for it. All right, so I'm going to teach you 3 things today, and the first one is about autistic communication style. So we are very proud of our communication style. It is direct, it is honest, it is blunt. If the emperor is not wearing clothing, we are here to tell you. You're welcome. Now, some people find us rude or abrasive, and one of the reasons that we get known for this is because the most important thing to an autistic person, whether they know this term I'm about to teach you or not, is something called monotropic flow. That is a hyper-focused state when you are doing your thing, when you are researching and memorizing and cataloging patterns and whatever your special interest is. When somebody interrupts that, it is very unpleasant. If we are not now in a state of flow, we want to be in one. And so when it comes to small talk or chit chat, we often answer very directly and bluntly. But just because it's autistic culture doesn't mean you haven't all participated in it. So imagine there's a big wolf pack Duke game going on. You are watching that game with intense focus, and somebody comes and stands right in front of the screen. What do you say? Move, correct. And that's the right answer inside our culture. So the autistic researcher Richard Woods says, may your stimming activities be many and your flow states long. And that is because our flow states are so key. But one of the things that interrupts our flow states is sensory input that is overwhelming. So maybe it's too hot or too bright or too loud or too beepy. That can take us out of these flow states. And one of the ways we manage those stimuli is through stimming. So let's say I hear a song I love, or I see some bright rainbow, some bright color that makes me happy. I might flap with joy because I literally can't contain the excitement. This experience is called a glimmer. And I might also hear a leaf blower or have a scratchy tag, and I might rock or yell with discomfort from that trigger. So we have glimmers and triggers. These are part of a theory called the intense world theory that drives a lot of autistic decision making and behaviors. So let's say you're at the grocery store or you're at the movies and there's some kid who is spinning or yelling or rocking or flapping and you're wondering why that's happening. Well, in autistic culture, when that happens, we celebrate that because we know what's happening is emotional regulation. That's how we manage all that stimuli. Now, it might be seen as rude in other cultures if you don't understand the context, but in autistic culture, when we are regulated and when we are in our monotropic flow, the way we process information, now that is where we shine. So autistic people are bottom-up processors. Best way I can explain this to you is if you think about Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes goes into the crime scene. He's looking at all these minute little data points. You might not even see them, a dust particle there, a little fleck of dirt here. And he draws them together from the bottom up into a theory of the crime. He is pattern matching. That is what autistic people at our best can do. Sir Isaac Newton, great example. He's in a flow state. He is thinking about how the world works. He's sitting under the apple tree, and whoop, that apple falls. And what does Newton come up with? The theory of gravity. And it wasn't just gravity Newton came up with. Newton came up with calculus. You didn't seem excited about calculus. Calculus. Okay, even if you did not like studying calculus, I promise you, you like the results of calculus. You know, like bridges, boats, buildings, all that. And see, this is why autistic advocates like me get so frustrated when there is talk about curing autism and finding the cure and eliminating the epidemic. Because I promise you, the world is better with us in it. Autistic people are part of the diversity of humanity. I imagine a world where we learn autistic culture like that, the same way that you learn, I don't know, Finnish sauna traditions or Japanese greeting customs. But for that to happen, I think we need to do three things. So the first and the most important is that we have to stop treating autism itself as a medical condition. Autistic people have medical conditions. Autism isn't one of them. It's just a genetic variation like eye color or arm length. Number two, when there are problems that autistic people have, and there are many, we need to make sure those problems are solved with input from autistic people and from autistic culture. And the third, and this is what I need you all for, it can't just be autistic people pushing for this. We have to come together and say, we value different neurotypes for what they contribute to society for all of us. Yes, please, we would like bridges and boats and buildings and the type of bottom-up systematic thinking that gets them there. I imagine a world where little autistic kids grow up knowing their differences are not flaws. But autistic people are in a vulnerable moment right now. Our culture cannot survive, and it certainly cannot thrive unless it is valued and recognized. So today, this talk, this isn't just a request for autism awareness or a plea for autistic acceptance. This is a call to save autistic lives. This is a call for autistic justice.